Nighty was walking down the forest path away from the village on his own. He was rubbing his swollen cheek in annoyance. It had a pretty nasty bruise as well. This was due to another annoying scuffle with the villagers. One of them punched him in the face for simply trying to ignore them. He just wanted to finish some of the books he was reading, and now, not only is he injured, but his books were stolen. Chances are they were ripped to shreds by now. It was a big shame, really. He liked a specific book he was reading. The Chance of a Spellcaster. He remembered how that plot went fondly. A young spellcaster who was learning magic with all his heart, yet his magic was weak. A lot of people doubted him and his capabilities, to the point people just made fun of him. Nighty thought about it and realized he and the spellcaster had a lot in common. They were book nerds who always did their best. The character wanted to be a great sorcerer, while Nighty wanted to be a great guardian. Like the character, Nighty is smart. He may be alone, but he knew he was capable of so much more. He wanted to be just like that character. He eventually stopped walking. The young guardian sighed.
I may want it, but I know I'll never be great,
he told himself. In his perspective, he wasn't a good guardian. He literally left the tree just because of something that just happens almost every day. Thankfully, he did manage to cast a protective spell around the tree. The barrier can deflect anyone that comes near. Sure, he could use it on himself, but that would just agitate the villagers. Plus, what if his younger brother got hurt in the process? If they can't take their anger out on him, they might inflict it onto Dream. He cannot let that happen. Even if Dream left him alone at times, he never felt, not once, that Dream did it with malicious intent. He knew his little brother loved him. Though, he also knew those villagers didn't love Dream. He stood there with clenched fists for a while. It annoyed him, really. He knew those offers of friendship towards Dream were just fake. He always knew from the very core of his soul. He could see the true intent behind all the gaslighting. Nighty then proceeded to walk down the path. It was fall today. This was his first time seeing the gorgeous orangey and yellowish leaves. They were beautiful. He decided to think back to the story of the book. How the young spellcaster decided to sneak out one night into the dark forest. He managed to get past the guards of the Sorcerer's Academy by managing to do a cloaking spell. The only successful spell he was able to do.
Come to think of it, my barrier spell was also a successful first try,
Nighty said as he looked at his hands, and smiled, feeling a bit proud. He and the character in the book had the same goal. To prove to everyone they were wrong. That there was more to them than meets the eye. And that they can carve out their own path.
If I keep going, will I find what I need up ahead?
He looked to the path he had been walking on for hours. Nighty was worried if he had been gone for too long. He looked back, thinking maybe he should at least see if Dream had come back or if the barrier was even still up. He turned around, taking 3 steps, but paused.
This is the first time I ever defied what I was supposed to do. Why should I head back now? I know something's ahead for me, I can feel it.
With that said, Nighty turned and ran down the path into the forest. Deeper and deeper. He was running on adrenaline. He felt his soul pound. He was scared but also excited. He didn't know how long he was running. Had it been hours? He was panting tiredly. He didn't care though how tired he was. He didn't want to give up. He refused to give up. Something had to change in his life. Right? The next thing he knew, he felt warmth. Nighty had his eyes shut for a while, but when he looked up, a bright light consumed his surroundings. He covered his eyes with one arm. Where did this sudden light come from? He thought. Was he going to find the answer he was looking for if he kept going? He does so, walking forwards. He was still afraid, but he kept thinking back to that story. The young spellcaster had kept going no matter how afraid he was. And although Night didn't know what was gonna happen next in the story due to those villagers, he knew he had to make the rest of the story out himself. Eventually, the strange light faded. Nightmare blinked a few times to clear his vision. He looked around in confusion, his eyes fixated on a small abandoned house. Well, it looked more like a run-down cabin if anything. A window was broken, some of the wood was chipped and floorboards had fallen off or are drooping. Holes on the floor and the porch had broken wooden pillars. Night was worried going there might have the entire structure collapse on him. Regardless though, he took a breath in and walked towards the small house. Once he stepped on the porch, it creaked. Each step made the young guardian nervous. He had to close an eye and reopen it again, just to make sure nothing was going to fall on top of him. Eventually, though, he makes it to the door. He slowly opened the door. Some of the dust and a bit of debris fell from the ceiling of the outside porch. Night grit his teeth nervously. He was internally praying it wasn't gonna fall. The creaking grew louder as he fully opened the door. Night gave a sigh of relief. Stepping inside there gave him a face full of cobwebs. He yelped a bit, waving his arms around, dust and web just spreading about. He threw the webs onto the floor once he broke them off. He panted, a bit frantic from that little experience. He catches his breath, trying to calm down. Then his eyes slowly looked around the room. The inside was actually hollow. There was no furniture, no other rooms, just hay, wood, and webs spread across the floor and upper structures of the cabin. A bit of disappointment came up Nighty's expression.
Is this all there is? It can't be. Right. Maybe whoever lived here dropped something.
Nighty said, mustering up a bit of hope that there must be something here for him. Maybe just underneath all this mess.
Whoever lived here must have packed up fast. Chances are, they were bound to have dropped something important.
With that said, Nighty began to move some of the wood and hay, looking around as much as possible. It didn't matter how dirty his hands got. He was determined to find something. And eventually, his determination paid off. He moved a large piece of wood and found something that made his mouth form into a slight smile. The next day had arrived. Night felt rather guilty for making his little brother worry yesterday. He came back when it was getting dark. As usual, though, he just made an excuse to dream that was convincing enough that the little sunshine brought. He was pretty proud of himself though, since the barrier he made stayed up for as long as it did. As usual, he sat under the tree of balance, clutching a new book he got. Usually, he wouldn't feel so gleeful about being in the same spot, knowing full well his tormentors would show up to bother him. However, today was different. He was smiling gleefully as he waited. And right on time, the negative guardian hears.
Well, if it isn't the freak.
He heard from one of the villagers. A group of 5 coming over.
Here.
The villager dropped the shredded pieces of Night's book.
What trash. To think, you read this garbage.
Night looked to the shredded remains of the book he wanted to finish reading yesterday. His face became cold. Then he looked up at them with daggers in his eyes. Then, a warm but fake smile replaced the cold and emotionless expression he had.
Well, if you didn't like the story of that one, how about I read you a better one?
The villagers were a bit taken aback by Night's response. Night opened his new book and began to read almost immediately, with eagerness.
As the villagers closed in on the guardian of negativity, they were fools to think they could lay a finger upon him again. As one of them attempted to lay their putrid fingers on him, the attacker's arm had paused. He felt the surge of pain shoot through his arm as it began to rot away, spreading throughout the villager's body. The poor pathetic soul fell to the ground, shriveled up, and soon turned to dust.
Night had read that like a story, but his tone filled with venom, hate, and glee. One of the villagers even paled, though some had laughed it off.
Since when did you all of a sudden have guts to talk to us like that, you freak?
The villager said in a mocking way. Night just smirked.
Then try to hit me.
He dared them. One of them did just that. With spite-filled rage, the villager launches his fist towards Night. But Night had no plans to move away. He showed no fear. Before one of the villagers could even stop the guy, the other fell to his knees so suddenly before he could even hit Night. The guy screamed in agony. The others got worried and went close. They gasped in horror. The guy's hand was indeed rapidly rotting and decayed. His whole hand was gone in seconds. Panic overcame him and almost immediately he reached out to the guardian of negativity, begging to make it stop. Tears streamed down their face. Their whole arm boiled painfully and flesh melted to ooze. Night just shrugged and casually said,
Sorry, nothing I can do.
The others were frozen with fear and some begged. They were too afraid to go near since they did not want to suffer the same fate. The villager fell to the ground, half of his face gone. His vital organ had already decayed away, so the guy was dead. As he was still rotting away, Night then said,
If you ever try to touch me ever again, I promise you, all of you will perish. I'm merely doing my job. And if you know what is good for you, you will leave me alone.
They could see a hint of turquoise in Nightmare's usually purple eyes. He had the widest and most sadistic grin. About a while later, Dream had returned. He was carrying a bag of medicine in case Night got injured again. Despite he had promised his brother not to worry, he just couldn't help it. So he was prepared.
Nighty, why won't you tell me the truth?
He said low to himself. The guardian of positivity hated being dragged off by the villagers. But he had a duty, even if it was annoyingly overwhelming. It was just luck right now that he managed to get away. As he was walking back to the tree, he sucked in some air and quickly gave a bright smile, that way his brother wouldn't worry about him as well.
Brother, I'm back.
He then pauses and saw Night was putting something into the hole he had dug in the ground. It looked like a pile of white ash or something. Night then turned to his dear brother and smiled brightly. Dream was surprised to see him smile for once when he came.
Welcome back, little brother.
Night greeted him as he takes his small shovel to place the soil back to cover the hole. Dream blinked a few times in confusion. He was happy that Night wasn't hurt for once.
Brother, you actually don't have any injuries for once. Does that mean your sickness is better?
The younger knelt near him, to which Night responded by nodding happily.
I'm sorry I kept worrying you about that, dear brother. But know that from now on, I will no longer be having those injuries.
Night stated proudly, pounding his chest a bit. Dream just had sparkling eyes of joy, so happy to see his big brother so confident and joyful for once. He hugged him tight and the two shared a few giggles.
I'm so happy. But
Dream looked back to the dirt covering the hole.
Brother, what exactly were you doing while I was gone?
Night had a momentarily surprised look.
Oh, I was just using new fertilizer. I thought we could start planting flowers around the tree.
Night quickly said, trying to hide the nervousness in his tone. Dream looked at him for a moment with a brow raised and then went,
Oh.
He wasn't sure if that was a lie or not, but he didn't want to ruin his brother's smile.
Well, I like that idea.
Dream gave a big smile. He then notices the book next to his brother.
Brother, did you get a new book?
Dream asked curiously. Night looks to it, and quickly picks it up.
Oh, you could say that.
He gave a wide smile. It's a book where I can write my own story. Maybe I can write some stories about your little friends. If you want, Dream. All I need is their names.